Should I take agronomy or horticulture? Are they the same? How are they different? This is the question many plant scientists ask themselves, especially when trying to choose a major or a class. Or just have an understanding of these two different areas that I hear agriculture people talk about. This is Horticulture Areas and Careers by Mrs. Tessa Mahmoudi. Let's get started. After watching this video, you'll be able to describe why the green industry is vital for global health. You'll be able to locate where horticulture fits into this puzzle or umbrella of plant science. You'll also be able to classify crops into the different areas of horticulture, agronomy, or forestry, and you'll get 3 tools to classify. You'll also be able to list areas of horticulture and the impact of each of them. So let's get started. What is the green industry? The green industry is the horticulture industry, this industry that's all around us, interacting with us intimately, from the food that we eat, to the parks that we play in, to the green areas that we play sports in, to the landscapes that make our communities look so beautiful, to the air quality, the oxygen that we breathe. Plants interact with us and us with them all the time, impacting our quality of life. So the horticulture industry has tremendous growth, business opportunities, and needs skilled, knowledgeable employees. People always need to eat, so it's a healthy industry to invest in as a career. This map might be a little bit overwhelming, but helps us understand what different sciences and applied sciences are in the area of science, specifically agricultural sciences. So there's a lot of science in agriculture that we don't usually think of. There's the engineering that goes into the building of tractors, geology of studying different land soil formations that affect how our crops grow, the chemistry of the soil that we grow plants in, the biochemistry where biology meets chemistry because biological organisms are continuously producing chemicals that impact, signal other processes. The genetics that our plants have and how understanding the genetics can help us develop more efficient plants. And then botany, which is another science, hard science associated with horticulture, and physiology, how plants interact with their environment and respond to signals such as heat or water availability. So these are all different sciences that people can get PhDs in or undergrads in or master's degrees in, but all farmers rely on all these sciences to do the very thing that keeps us all alive, produce food. So there's biological sciences and physical sciences going into the area of agriculture science. Agriculture, if you say you're an agriculturist, you might work with plants, entomology, which is insects, or animal science. Underneath the umbrella of plant science, there's 3 types of plant science: forestry, agronomy, and horticulture. So I understand forestry is something to do with forest trees, correct? Yes. But what's the difference between agronomy and horticulture? You'll be able to know that after this video. So first of all, I want to go over the different areas within horticulture. So horticulture has areas such as turfgrass, ornamental horticulture, olericulture, and pomology. Some new terms. Olericulture is vegetable production, and pomology is fruit production. Underneath the areas of ornamental horticulture, we have landscape, such as landscape design, floristry, such as the cut flower industry, floriculture, flower production, and then something called nursery. So when you think nursery, you might think of small children, babies, and that's correct. When you think of nursery within the area of horticulture, think a facility where we're growing young plants. So if you're growing flowers in a nursery or greenhouse, that's considered floriculture nursery. You can also grow vegetables in a nursery or pomology, do pomology in a nursery such as fruit production in a greenhouse. Going back to this slide, we can see that there's a little bit of overlap between turfgrass. So in some institutions, turfgrass is underneath the larger umbrella of agronomy, whereas some universities put the turfgrass people within the horticulture department. Don't get confused about this differentiation. It can go either way. So the definition of horticulture, I really like this definition because it explains how large the industry really is. So first off, let's read this. The science, technology, and art of culturing, utilizing, and improving fruit, vegetables, flowering, and ornamental plants. So don't get overwhelmed with this definition, but think about these three first keywords: science, technology, and art. That means that if you're a science person, technology person, or an art person, there's an area for you within horticulture, and I think that's really cool. Agriculture, on the other hand, is the science and technology and art of growing and raising plants and animals. So plants plus animals, agriculture. Forestry is the science and technology of culturing, utilizing, and improving forest trees and their products. Agronomy is the science and technology of culturing, utilizing, and improving field crops, such as grain, fiber, and forage crops. So let's pause here. Some common crops associated to be in the agronomy subsection would be wheat, corn. These are grains. Also fiber, such as cotton, and forage crops such as alfalfa and other grasses that are used to feed animals. So these are crops that are grown on a very large scale. When you think large scale agriculture, think agronomy. When you think smaller scale, more high value crops, think horticulture. Take a minute to pause and see if you can fill in these two missing blanks. The science, technology, and art of culturing, utilizing, and improving blank, vegetables, blank, and ornamental plants. Take time to make sure that you know these. These pictures both have grass in them, one with cows and another with a rainbow and beautifully manicured grass. Both of them grass, but the crop with the cows is considered agronomy because it's being used to feed animals, whereas the same plant, grass, in this well-manicured lawn is in the horticulture industry because it's being used as a landscape design plant. If you're still confused about placing different crops or plants within the area of horticulture, agronomy, and forestry, I have 3 rules for you. 3 keys to differentiating. The first one, which we'll go over all of them, is intensity of production, purpose the crop is grown, and the tradition or custom of that crop. What does it mean by intensity of production? Well, let's compare the production, the growing of strawberries versus cotton. Strawberries is a crop that takes a lot of time to harvest. Each strawberry has to be hand-picked. Sometimes the strawberry got fungal growth on it, or it is bad, or overripe, or underripe. And so the person that's picking it has to know if it's a good strawberry or a bad strawberry. This takes a lot of time to harvest strawberries. The harvesting process is really intense. It takes a long time. So horticulture crops has a higher intensity of production, meaning it takes longer to harvest or to do other techniques such as planting or weeding. Cotton, on the other hand, has been very mechanicalized harvesting. Harvesting is very mechanized. The purpose that the crop is grown is another way to differentiate which area it is. So let's see this oak tree in a forest versus an oak tree within someone's landscape. The oak tree in the forest is considered a forestry crop, whereas the plant in the landscape, the oak tree in the landscape is considered horticulture because it's under the subsection of landscape design. The final rule of thumb is the tradition or custom. So traditionally, people grow sweet corn in their garden. So it's considered a horticultural crop. Nowadays, sweet corn is grown on a large scale, which usually when we think of large scale, we think of agronomy. But because of this long-stated tradition, and people still grow a lot of sweet corn in their gardens, sweet corn is considered a horticultural crop, whereas field corn is grown, which is also grown on a large scale, is considered an agronomy crop. Some people might not know the difference between these two crops. Field corn is on this side. It's a more yellow color, and it is harvested when at the end of the season when the grains have dried out, and it is used for corn syrup, cereals, tortillas, and as an animal feed. Sweet corn, which usually has the lighter colored tassels versus these are a little bit darker, has more yellow and white kernels, and is picked when it is still has a high moisture content and is used eaten directly, such as barbecuing sweet corn. So let's get some practical experience classifying crops. So I want you to write down 1 through 4 in your notebook. We're going to go through 4 different plants. I want you to write down the name of the plant and which area you think that it falls into. What crop is this? Which area is it? Horticulture, agronomy, or forestry? Number 2, name the crop and which area you think it falls under. Number 3, name the crop and which area you think it falls under. Number 4, name the crop and which area you think that it falls under. Horticulture, agronomy, or forestry. How do you think you did? Let's see. This crop is, yes, tomatoes. Tomatoes are usually grown in gardens. They're a high value crop that are pretty intense to produce. They're considered horticulture. This is a popular tree, and it is grown in large scale forests and has multiple uses. It is a forestry crop. This crop is produced in very high acreage in the United States. It is soybeans and is grown on very large acreage, and the planting and harvesting is quite mechanized. It is an agronomy crop. This last one is a very high valued crop that people often grow in their gardens and is a horticulture crop. What's the crop? It's mint. Now that we know how to classify crops, we're going to go over the career areas within horticulture. What I love about horticulture is it's an applied science, and we use specific knowledge to achieve a specific goal. A goal in horticulture could be increase the yield of a vegetable or fruit. It could be to increase the taste of a fruit. It could be to decrease the amount of water that we use in production. There's another area that's called botany that sometimes gets people confused. Botany is the correlated hard science for horticulture. Botany deals with plant classification, plant biochemistry, and anatomy. Botany is defined very broadly as the scientific study of plants. This link will take you to some example careers within botany. Some examples of what a botanist could do is they could identify a completely new plant species. They could evaluate that plant for its uses and explain in written and drawing form of the parts of that plant. Some botanists study the structure of plants. Here's a list of the areas of horticulture that we will cover. Let's get started. Arboriculture, which is vegetable cultivation and production. This is a picture of the Howdy Farm at Texas A&M, where they are growing lots of beautiful vegetables. So what would my career look like if I was to choose a career in arboriculture? Well, you could have a beautiful garden like this, sell the produce at a farmer's market, and help feed the world. So you could be a vegetable grower or a vegetable farm manager on your own land or somebody else's. You'd be responsible for planting, scheduling, deciding which plants to grow, monitoring the growth of those plants, supervising pest and disease control, and supervising the harvest of these crops. You could also be a cannery field manager. This is a career that's you're a liaison between canners, people who can vegetables, and the growers of those vegetables. For example, you could help tomato farmers find the people who were going to process and can those tomatoes to get those to the consumer. The next area is pomology, fruit and nut cultivation and production. This is a beautiful picture of peaches that I took in California and watermelon production, a photo that I took in Texas. What's a career like in pomology, you might ask? Well, you could be an orchard supervisor, like the supervisor of this peach orchard. His name was Andy, and he's been farming peaches for over 30 years. He explained to me that the peach industry has changed. The different types of peaches that he's grown have gotten sweeter and more delicious. And the competition with other growers of fruit has also changed. Orchard supervisors are very good at growing their fruit trees. They might specialize in a particular fruit, but they might also have to diversify and grow other fruits in times where market trends change. Pomology is more than just fruit, remember, it's also nuts. So growing pecans is also considered to be a pomologist. An orchard supervisor might own their own orchard, or they might work for somebody who owns the orchard. You could also have a career in pomology. You could be a berry grower, such as a you-pick farm, or someone who's growing and picking the berries. Strawberries, blackberries, raspberries, blueberries, just think of all the opportunity to sell berries. The next area is viticulture, the study of growing grapes and vines. Some careers within viticulture are grape vineyard supervisor, or a viticulturist. They produce table grapes for fresh eating and special, and they could also grow wine grapes. A grape vineyard supervisor is in charge of planting, pruning, pest and disease control, and harvesting of grapes. There's also a career in viticulture, such as an enologist, which is a winemaker. They work part of their time in the field and part of their time in the laboratory, deciding just the right time to harvest the grapes to make the highest quality wine. They may also oversee the winemaking process, from crushing and pressing the grapes, fermenting the grapes, filtering, bottling, and aging the wine. They'd be in charge of all this. They also might manage sales, arrange advertising, marketing, or conducting tours of the winery. The next area we'll cover is turfgrass, the study of grasses for lawns, landscapes, sport facilities, and golf courses. As we said before, this is also considered an area of agronomy in many universities. Let's go over some example careers within turfgrass. You could be a grass seed producer. You would oversee production of seeds in the field, including growing, pest control, harvesting, cleaning, packaging, and marketing the grass seed. I don't know when the last time you bought grass seed is, but it's cost a pretty penny. Golf course, you could manage a golf course, cemetery, or park. These people are called superintendent or a greenskeeper. You're responsible for everything to keep the grass beautiful and manicured. This has a lot that goes into it because, as you can see in your neighborhood, grass can be hard to keep looking beautiful. There's also a career within turfgrass called a sod producer. You would be growing sod. Sod is grown in large fields and then harvested, rolled up, and then sold to people who would like a beautiful lawn, but they don't want to wait for the seeds to grow. Once the sod gets to the landscape, the installer rolls out the grass and voila, you have a beautiful grass lawn. It is very important to make sure that you prepare the area very well and that you water the sod, or else your beautiful, expensive lawn won't last long. But there's definitely a lot of business opportunity as a sod producer. More careers within turfgrass. You could be a lawn maintenance service. You could be the owner of this service, mowing different people's lawns. You could also be the sports field manager, such as at a large university or high school, or at many different golf courses. They also have managers in making sure that the lawn looks just great. All right, another area is arboriculture. This is the growing and studying of trees, specifically trees that are being grown in urban areas. This is a beautiful picture of the live oak tree on Texas A&M's campus called the century tree. Many arborists work hard to make sure this tree stays healthy and can live many more years. Silviculturists study trees in forests. So, if silviculture is in forests and arboriculturists work in urban environments, which is this person? Are they a silviculturist or an arboriculturist? What do you think? Since we can see the sidewalk and the well-manicured lawn, we are considered that this is an urban environment, so this is an arboriculturist. Arborists can be university trained in landscape horticulture with a specialization in arboriculture, or they can receive on-the-job training with a certified arborist. They do tasks such as removing tree limbs or climbing up trees to prune them. Another career within arboriculture is a Christmas tree grower. You would imagine that most of your income comes only at one time of the year, but can be quite extensive in that time. You could also be a tree nursery owner. We remember that nursery means the cultivation of small plants, usually in greenhouses, and there's an opportunity to grow trees to then sell to people who grow them in their yard. You could also be an arboretum supervisor. If you have a thorough knowledge of tree species and their propagation and care, you can supervise an arboretum. The next larger sub-area we will cover is ornamental horticulture. This is the use of plants for aesthetic uses. We're improving the quality of life in our environment and the functional uses of plants to be used in the environment. Floriculture is flowering and foliage plant culture and production. So think a large greenhouse with many different flowers or a field of flowers. This is floriculture. Floristry is floral design. So taking those flowers that were grown by a floriculturist, then a florist takes those and makes these beautiful floral arrangements. So floristry is floral design and retail floristry operation. Landscape horticulture is also underneath the ornamental horticulture, and this is the designing and implementing of exterior and interior designs, as along with the construction and maintenance of landscapes. and nursery production, which is the growing of these plants that are used in our landscapes. So landscape horticulture is very broad and has many different career opportunities. The industry employs many thousands of people in many different job specialties, such as lawn care personnel or someone who specializes in orchids to making sure they look beautiful, to somebody who specializes in tree planting. So lots of different careers. Going further into the career opportunities, you could be a landscape designer, which means you develop a plan for the planted areas around homes or small communities or commercial areas. So these are some really cool models of what the person is thinking that the landscape should be around this landscape. This is a building that's being planned to be built, and this is a design of what the landscape designer wants the landscape to look like. This is a cardboard cutout. This is wood laser cutout, and this one is computer generated. So computer science, the improvement of computer science is really changing the work of landscape designers, because they can really help their clients see in real life what their landscape will look like. You can also be a landscape estimator, estimating which plants are needed and which materials. You can also be a landscape contractor, which you're contracting large-scale projects for implementing large landscaping, say the landscape around a business or a park or a housing project. You could also be a retail nursery salesperson. You could assist customers in selecting the right plants to suit the growing conditions around their homes. Lots of different opportunities in landscape horticulture. I hope by now that you see that there's a lot of different career areas within landscape horticulture. Just to name a few more, don't get overwhelmed. You don't need to memorize them all. But you could also be an owner of a retail nursery. You could be the owner of a mail order nursery. You could be the landscape installation supervisor. Lots of different careers. You could be the nursery production supervisor, overseeing the full range of production of shrubs and trees. You can be an inventory controller, making sure that all the plants are healthy and available to the customer. You could also be a nursery shipping manager. And then some other areas, you could be a ground maintenance supervisor, supervising the crew performing activities such as pruning, irrigation, planting, cleaning, spraying, and fertilizing different landscapes. You could even work at a zoo or a park to supervise the landscape there. Wouldn't that be really cool to have to go into the giraffe cage and make sure that the trees were doing well? I think so. You could also be an irrigation specialist, making sure that irrigation systems are working well for different communities or installing them in people's yards. And one of my favorites, you could be a supervisor at a horticulture garden, a botanical garden, or an arboretum. Quick side note, what's a botanical garden? What's an arboretum? An arboretum, think of a zoo for trees. Botanical garden, think of a zoo for plants. So an area where you go and you see all different types of plants. An arboretum, you see all different types of trees. It's really a cool experience. I definitely recommend going to one. If you are a supervisor of one of these facilities, you'd be responsible for overseeing all the different day-to-day activities that goes into running one of these facilities. So you'd be planning seasonal displays, giving talks and tours to the public about the importance of plant diversity. You'd be maintaining records of all the different plants you have at the facility, and you'd be budgeting because it's a large business, deciding how much it costs to come into the botanical garden, deciding how much money you're going to spend on buying new plants for the garden, or the budget for how many people are going to go explore and bring back different plants to the botanical garden or arboretum. So lots of day-to-day activities to manage. So we've covered a lot of things, so let's review. What's the difference between pomology and olericulture? Do you remember? Pomology is fruit and olericulture is vegetables. But don't forget that pomology also includes nuts. What's the hard science that's correlated with horticulture again? Yes, botany. How would you classify mint as a crop? Is it in horticulture, agronomy, or forestry? That's right, it's horticulture. What about green beans? Well, this might be a tricky one because green beans are often grown in gardens, but they're also in agronomy. So it'd be safe to say that green beans are within horticulture. What about wheat? Wheat is grown on a very large scale and is a grain. It's considered agronomy. Same with soybeans, it's grown on a very large scale. So is this pomology or olericulture? Pomology. Is this floriculture or forestry? Forestry. Is this turfgrass or forestry? Turfgrass. Is this forestry or viticulture? It's a vine, so it's viticulture. And what career is this? I'll give you a hint. Is it silviculture or arborist? Remember, silviculture is in the forest and arborist is trees within the urban environment. Yes, it's silviculture. That's all for this lecture. I hope that everything makes sense. If not, feel free to ask me questions, and I'll see you next time.